When I recorded Ebb Flow, I started with a simple drum track created with Soft Drummer, and then layered together multiple EWI parts using just one custom patch in the relatively new modular synthesis app, miRack. miRack is an iOS port of the desktop app VCV. These apps are designed to be a software simulation of the popular Eurorack modular system. I'm finding that miRack can work really well with the EWI. It offers almost infinite possibilities for routing the expression controls that the EWI can send. I can send a single control signal to multiple parameters simultaneously, independently controlling the range and response behavior of each one using attenuators and slew modules. In the description section below, you will find more details and links to related resources, including where to download a copy of the patch, so you can experiment with it yourself. So this is an overview of the custom miRack patch that I created for use with EWI for the project Ebb Flow, the video that I posted recently. First thing you'll see on this screen is the top two rows are primarily for visual feedback and for the main controls. I tried to provide big knobs for things that might actually want to get tweaked from one session to another. And then the intricacies of the routing and module connections and everything are down in the lower rows. But I left a nice big oscilloscope up top so that we can watch the waveforms. And next to the oscilloscope there are 4 meters that are connected to the 4 primary expressive controls coming off of the EWI. So notice when I apply breath pressure through the mouthpiece, there's 1 meter that goes. There's also pitch bend. When I hit pitch bend down, that meter goes. And I actually have pitch bend up reprogrammed to send mod wheel, and so that's sending to a different channel. And then the glide strip, which controls portamento and can be mapped to other things, that shows up on that meter. So that's good just to see what's going where. And the byte sensor on the EWI 4000 actually does an oscillating pitch bend, and so I can, if I do pitch bend with the right thumb, it does an intentional. Or if I do byte pressure, I can get a vibrato effect by oscillating pitch bend. Next, let's take a look at some of the knobs that I have set up. The oscillator module, the VCO, voltage controlled oscillator, can output 4 different wave shapes, and for this patch I'm starting with a layer of both a sine wave and a square wave. And so you can see I've got those mapped to these knobs in this 4-channel mixer. So I've just got the square and the sine turned up, the saw and the triangle are turned down. You could turn those up for some variation in tone color. Next, we've got a slew, and when you're working, especially with the EWI, slew becomes an important function at a couple of different levels. Most commonly, what you care about slew for is in breath pressure. So the EWI is generating breath values from 0 to 127 over MIDI, continuous controller 2. And often that gets mapped to volume or VCA, voltage controlled amplifier, and or to filter cutoff frequency. And
In either of those cases, you can get a zippering effect if the numbers, the values being sent aren't handled well by the synthesizer. So what a slew does is it actually smooths out the transition from one number to the next. And if you do too much slew, it comes out as a delay in response. But if you do just a little bit, it smooths over the granularity of that 0 to 127 and makes it sound more analog and less digital. Breath, it's really hard to see because especially at a normal frame rate on the video, but I do have these two meters side by side, one showing the input signal and one showing the slew signal. It's a lot easier to show slew when it's being applied at a slower speed for portamento. So the meters on the top left of the second row here are showing note values, and that's why they're kind of seems stuck where they are. If I play a low note, they go down low, or I go up the octaves, it goes up, but it just holds the last note that I played. But if I apply glide or portamento, you can see that the input note changes faster than the output note. The output note is after the slew, and it's set slow enough that you get that glide effect, that portamento effect. And so if I start down low and go up high and then back down low again, you can see that the output meter follows a little lag and a smoother flow than what I'm actually giving it in input, sliding up and down the range. So in addition to the square wave and the sine wave that I have layered together, to get a little extra color into the tone being generated by those waves, I've got them routed through a wave shaper module. And it does what's known as wave folding to put some extra little wrinkles in the wave. And you can see that in the scope. Where there's a little bit of a squarish component, but it's got a jagged edge to it, and there's a little bit of a sine component on the downward slope. And so that gives an interesting, to me, acoustic-ish tone color that I really like. So the other thing that I've done here is I've applied a principle that Daniel Riera highlighted in one of his recent videos, where if you are able to make the pulse width fixed or nearly fixed as opposed to following the frequency, you end up with tone colors that more closely mimic acoustic instruments. So you can see in the very low octave, I've got the square wave portion coming in at about a third of the total pulse width there. And the squarish portion remains relatively constant across those three octaves. Now you get up higher than that and it starts to get squished a little bit, just because that's all there is to do. So in the really high octaves it starts to sound a little more generically squarish, but that's okay. And so you get these sonorities that follow differently across the range of the instrument. So the other thing that I've done is I've overloaded the glide control so that in addition to controlling portamento, it tightens that pulse width even further. And so with no glide strip depressed, it's the sound that I just did. But if I add that glide strip, it will gradually tighten up that wave, which gives it a more nasal or pinched sound, which just follows the visual, actually. And so in practical terms, it takes it from a more flute-like sound to a more oboe-like sound, or in some registers, kind of brassy, which I really like. And because it's overloading on the glide sensor, it changes what I have to do with articulation for certain types of phrasing. I can either lean into that glissando effect and get, you know, some Indian type sounds with the nasal tone and some different effects like that. Or if I'm careful to tongue fairly intentionally each note, I can avoid most of the glissando effect and still get some interesting articulations that way. So lots of interesting things happening there. The other thing that I've done to give expressive control is I've mapped the pitch bend up, which is actually triggering a mod wheel signal. I've mapped that to this module called the growler, which does a couple of different things with LFOs. Does just some what ends up sounding fairly chaotic, but the particular setting that I was able to dial in on the growler has the end result of creating a somewhat convincing overblown flute effect in the ranges where that makes sense. So if I start, and then I apply the growler, you can hear it's even got a little bit of a flutter tongue type effect in there, almost a Jethro Tull kind of feel, which is a lot of fun to play. And then when it gets down lower, especially if you combine it with the more pinched pulse width, you get into some maybe muted trombone types of sounds, different things like that. So that can be a lot of fun too. In Ebb Flow, I even took that to an extreme and got kind of a Charlie Brown's Teacher kind of effect with it. Some things like that. So that's the basics of how this patch works. I did apply some knobs just to blend in reverb and delay. Some of the other knobs can fine-tune some of the ranges in the slewing, so that can be helpful to get it to feel just right within the you know, you give it the range that is comfortable to play in, so you don't get too far into the crazy sounds if you're trying to keep it under a little bit tighter control. But the great thing about miRack is, you know, all this stuff is infinitely tweakable. You can make radical changes just by moving one cable connection from one module to another, twiddling a dial, you know, adding. There's hundreds of other modules that I haven't even begun to play with yet that give other types of sonic textures available. There's sample-based modules, FM synthesis, and all kinds of different effects. More things than I've had the time to even begin to delve into yet. I'm looking forward to learning more as I go. But just for the short amount of time that I've been working with it, I've been really pleased with the results that I'm getting, and I hope that I can encourage you to look into it too. For the money, it's just an incredible wealth of opportunity in learning about sound design.